I'd like to go over what would be considered the Godhead of the non-dual message. And we could call this the non-dual understanding. It's the overarching understanding of how this one reality works. And because we, at first at least, have to describe everything from 2 points of view. And the 2 points of view are from the ego and from the self. And the one reality, the non-dual understanding from the ego thinks that there is 2 separate realities here. That there's a real reality of the manifestation and there's an unreal reality of consciousness. Now, for those of us, especially in the Western mindset, this is so true, right? It's this manifestation, this physical world, these objects are real, and it's not until somebody points out this thing that's back here somewhere, known as consciousness. Oh yeah, I'm conscious, so what? But it's not, doesn't mean anything. It's not, doesn't have any value. So we understand this 2 parts of the reality from the ego, a real reality of the manifestation and an unreal reality of consciousness. Now, from the point of self, self only knows one reality of consciousness, of itself. Self is consciousness. And you might have heard me say this before and explain it this way, that non-duality is actually trying to describe 2 sides of a one-sided coin, right? Because there's not 2 of anything. This is Advaita. This is one without a second. So there can't be a coin with 2 sides. And one way to understand this is if you take the quantum physicists' understanding of what self is, they call it the unified field, and they say the unified field is a 2-dimensional plane of infinite potential. Now, a plane is only a point thick. A point is dimensionless. A point doesn't have a width or a depth or a height. It's realistically non-existent, which is exactly non-duality. Because in non-duality, if you could see this plane, if the top was heads and you looked at the bottom of it, the bottom would be heads as well, the one reality. But from an ego's point of view, right, it says there's duality here, that this is heads, and when I look at the bottom, it has to be tails. And another way to view it is the one reality. I like to put my hands together like this and say, this is consciousness. And consciousness can be, you could say, witnessed in 2 forms. It can be infinite and formless, and we'll take my hand, my 2 palms like this, flat, as one consciousness, as the one reality, and consciousness in a finite form, you could say, is consciousness's activity. That would be consciousness dancing around like this. But it never becomes separate from itself. Its activity, consciousness's activity, never pulls itself apart from itself to be able to turn back and look at its infinite self. That would be duality. So this is the one reality from the self's point of view. Self, or consciousness, is either in 2 forms: an infinite formless self or in a finite form of itself. I'd like to read you a paragraph out of my up and coming book. The book is entitled Love Outpouring, and it talks about this specific topic. It says, because it is inherently known by self that the manifestation is truly not separate from itself, the manifestation is only infinite self collapsed down into finite self. The manifestation, therefore, is known as real by itself. Because of this, self knows the manifestation as itself. It's not separate from it. That is, self is the manifestation. Therefore, self never is or knows anything other than itself, even when it perceives itself in the form of the manifestation. Directly put, self is what your perception is. The manifestation you perceive is yourself. You could also view it as all the forms that gold takes, right? Gold can be a necklace or an earring. It could be a wedding band. It could be an ornament. And so it's only the one reality of gold appearing as all of these objects. And that is precisely the non-dual understanding. There is one substance of reality here. We can call that consciousness, awareness, being, existence, self. We could call it spirit or the divine, Brahman, God, unified field, right? There's all sorts of names for this one reality. But in this one reality, it manifests itself into the apparent manifestation of multiplicity, but it never becomes separate from itself when it does that. The underlying message of all of this, that it is impossible for there to be separation and suffering. And in that understanding, you lose the ability to hate and harm others, to manipulate and coerce others. And you yourself are incapable of being hurt along those same lines as well. So there is only this understanding of unity and happiness.